Hey, Scott Horton here to tell you about this great new book by Michael Swanson, The War State. In The War State, Swanson examines how Presidents Truman, Eisenhower, and Kennedy both expanded and fought to limit the rise of the new national security state after World War II. If this nation is ever to live up to its creed of liberty and prosperity for everyone, we are going to have to abolish the empire. Know your enemy. Get The War State by Michael Swanson. It's available at your local bookstore or at Amazon.com in Kindle or in paperback. Just click the book in the right margin at scotthorton.org or thewarstate.com. All right, y'all, Scott Horton Show. ScottHorton.org is the website. 4,000-something interviews in the archives there going back to 2003. And sign up for the podcast feed there. Follow me on Twitter at Scott Horton Show. Introducing our friend Patrick Cockburn, a Middle East correspondent for the Independent newspaper in Great Britain. And they reprint everything that he writes at UNS.com, the UNS Review. And of course, he's a very prolific author. His latest book, and he's written, two on the Islamic State, and now a compendium of pieces going back on the entire terror war, is called Chaos and Caliphate. And welcome back to the show, Patrick. How are you, sir?
I'm great. Thanks. Good to be back.
I really appreciate you joining us. We have very important news to talk about here, what's going on in Turkey. It's such a multifaceted story. With the attempted coup d'etat, and you are in Istanbul now, correct?
Correct, yep.
And I guess most important for the American audience to understand, the thing that jumped out at me the most is you say it is absolutely a widespread belief in Turkey, I don't know among all factions or which factions, but very widespread. You say that the USA was behind this coup all along, is that right?
Yeah, it's pretty pervasive because the guy who the government accuses, with some reason, of orchestrating this is this 75-year-old cleric, Fethullah Gulen, who lives in Pennsylvania and has been there since 1999. So they've always been suspicious that he had some links to U.S. intelligence and just had a cozy relationship with them.
Mm-hmm. And then, so, I don't know how stark all these dividing lines are in Turkish politics, but it seems like the coups of the past are always blamed on the Kemalist secularists, intent on keeping the secular nation of the Turkish state there. But then the Gulenists are a somewhat separate faction. Did they have an alliance to do this coup? Is that it, you think?
Nobody quite knows. It's a pretty amazing event. It's not really similar to previous coups because a lot of them were sort of the army high command as an institution deciding to take over from the civilians, either directly or telling some government to get out of power. But it wasn't, suddenly trying to, in this case, kill the president and take over various key institutions like the sort of chief of staff headquarters, intelligence headquarters. They bombed the parliament. This was very rough stuff. So 246 people, I think it is, were killed. Probably the real figure's a bit higher. So this was a pretty sort of a shocking event for Turkey. And particularly these days, they thought that things like that didn't happen anymore. So, this was a real tremendous explosion here. And with 1/3 of the generals, more than that, about 40% of the generals in the Turkish armed forces are under arrest at the moment. A lot of military units are confined to their bases. They've fired, I think it's 21,000 teachers. The presidential guard has been dissolved. 1/3 of the judiciary is gone. So it's a massive purge while they try and get rid of the Gulenists, as they're called, who seem to have sort of operated as an enormous secret society, but a very sort of pervasive one. And more details coming out how they got rid of the secularists and then inserted their own guys instead.
Mm-hmm. Well, now, so many people are being purged from the government, teachers up and down the line, and all you say, the tens of thousands of people, different descriptions. So I guess nobody's really saying all of them were in on the coup, right? Just that now this is Erdogan's chance to clean house and get rid of all of his opposition. Is that it?
Well, we're still waiting to see that. That's a sort of suspicion. But so far, the thing about the Gulen movement is it had a sort of public face and loads of institutions. I mean, they closed 1,000 schools on Saturday, which were sort of run by the Gulenists. They ran lots of charities. They even had trade unions. So there was a big sort of their newspapers, things like that. They had a big public face. But people who specialized in following them have told me they also sort of operated as a secret society, a very secret society, which right from the 1980s has been seen to penetrate the army, the civil service, the judiciary, and with a fair measure of success. And they were very cynical in their methods. In the foreign ministry, according to the foreign minister, they'd taken over the promotions board and set the exams for new people entering the foreign ministry. And they set these incredibly hard questions and then supplied their own candidates, sort of Gulenist sympathizers, Gulenist sleepers, with the real answers. So it's only Gulenists who got the job. So they just fired a couple of ambassadors, a load of diplomats, and probably fire a lot more. In the police, police intelligence had been taken over by them. This was very useful coming to the coup, because if people reported to some, intelligence organization or the police that they knew that this coup was upcoming or they'd seen something suspicious, they were actually reporting to people who were Gulenists themselves. So of course, this didn't get passed on. So this is a very sort of a country full of conspiracy theories, but there's no doubt this was an amazingly big conspiracy.
Right. It was interesting the way in one of your articles here that you've written recently, you even compare the Gulen movement to Opus Dei in terms of, when you say secret society.
Opus Dei, I think we're sort of, we're not exactly benign, but pretty small and much less effective than the Gulen movement. Yeah.
But just in terms of when you say secret society, what you mean really is a group where they have a first loyalty, a separate loyalty, that comes first before their government position or their actual oath of office.
But they have more than that. They have a sort of chain of command.
Right. Yeah.
There you are, a colonel or a brigadier or a captain in the army or the gendarmerie or the police. So, you answer to your superiors, but you have another chain of command, that's why I use the word sort of secret society, that it's sort of run from the top. It's a completely different hierarchy, and you basically answer to them.
Right. So now, back to the possible American role here. As you say, Gulen does live in Pennsylvania. Sort of, sounds like he must be a kept pet of the CIA. And, at the time that the coup, when it first broke out, we were all watching it, following developments on Twitter and on the news. And one of the first things that happened was American officials, high-level officials, told the Daily Beast and a couple of other sources that Erdogan has given it up. He's on his way to Germany now, begging for asylum. And then they even put out another story saying that the Germans refused him, so now he's on his way to Britain, asking them for asylum. When in fact, he was on his way back to the capital city. He wasn't going to give up without a fight. He was even risking getting shot down, flying circles in his private plane over the capital there. But he never went to Germany. But that came from a source somewhere on this side of the Atlantic Ocean, Patrick. I wonder if that's very meaningful to you, or maybe they're just glomming on.
Well, no, that's been very heavily publicized here in Turkey. So, I'm not saying that I believe that the U.S. was behind it. I don't know, but an awful lot of Turks do think that. I mean, this place has a kind of anti-American tone anyway, so that's been revved up a lot. It's in high gear at the moment. Mm-hmm. You never know this type of organization, at one moment the U.S. was cultivating what they deemed to be mild Islamists. The Gulenists seem to be in one bunch who they got quite close to. They were also kind of popular on Capitol Hill with those Republicans and Democrats. They put a lot of effort into that. But they seem to have operated very much like a cult, with the supreme leader, seen as being sort of semi-divine, a bit like, the Reverend Moon and so forth. But people kind of knew that they'd been infiltrating the armed forces, but nobody quite knew that it was this big. I mean, I was talking to a Turkish commentator yesterday. He says he's trying to think of an analogy for all this, and the only analogy he could come up with was, the invasion of the body snatchers. Remember that film in 1956? Uh-huh. When a town is taken over by I think it's seed pods. I can't quite remember the movie. Do you remember this?
Yeah, sure.
And it's sort of, it's not really happening in Turkey. I can't really think of anywhere else, where something exactly like this has happened.
Mm-hmm. That's a very special kind of coup, isn't it? Where you just kind of, you place your people in there one at a time, very subtly.
Yeah, but people
over
who've been
such a long period.
for 30 years, and people who entered school at 14 and went to Staff College, and you've been sort of pushing their promotion, so they've reached the colonel or brigadier general stage. But it also, there was some of it was closely organized, and some of it was, completely half-assed. They sent a lot of soldiers to Erdogan was staying in a hotel on the Aegean, a place called Marmaris. But they arrived late. Why did they arrive late? They didn't seem to know where the hotel was. That's the last levels where the hotel was. And then he'd already left. Now, maybe the timing of the coup may have been brought forward because they may have thought they were being detected, so it may have sort of started 6 hours before it was meant to, hence they would have missed him. But there were other, some weird aspects of this coup, maybe because units were meant to join it, didn't join it. They ended up by bombing the parliament, which went down really badly here, since they were their one sort of public statement was that they wanted to sort of restore peace, It was a Kemalist statement, but maybe this was sort of trying to get the secularists on their side. So it was a funny mixture of long-term, careful, secretive organization, and as I said, very sort of half-assed, sort of dislocated, disorganized approach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in the implementation there. So, yeah, I'm not sure if you're aware, but Phil Giraldi and Patrick Lang and Larry Johnson and the kind of former intelligence officer slash, current blogger community here in America, they're all convinced that, at least to a degree, and I think Giraldi wrote this up most explicitly for the American Conservative magazine. Oh, and also for UNS as well. That basically Erdogan knew that the coup was coming and he triggered it. He basically tricked them, baited them into moving early so that they would be caught out. Although that does seem to conflict with the story.
I don't believe this for a minute. He almost got killed. I don't think it was like that. He has quite a convincing account, but it was just a bit comical. That there he was, that his brother-in-law was the first person to tell him something strange was happening in Istanbul.
Yeah.
There were soldiers on the streets, sort of stopping traffic around one of the bridges. Then he said he rang up, the main national intelligence organization. The main intelligence guy there couldn't get anybody on the phone. Certainly couldn't get the head of it. Then he rang up the chief of staff. Couldn't get anybody there. Then he tried ringing up the prime minister. And so this all took about 4 hours, while the prime minister just couldn't get hold of anybody. So I think this fantastic screw-up is the better explanation.
Yeah, does kind of sound
the
like
head of intelligence was saying, yes, he was so busy, thwarting the coup. Then Erdogan appeared on a phone held in front of a television camera saying he was still alive and everybody should go and protest in the streets, which they did. And that's one of the things that sabotaged the coup. I think also that quite a large chunk of the army didn't join it. I think somebody was making the point to me that it was actually the sort of quite a bit of the land forces. It was centered in the sort of gendarmerie and the paramilitary sort of police and the air force. That quite a chunk of the land forces didn't join it, so they were short on troops. And then they didn't kill Erdogan, and he was calling for these protests. And then he arrived. He flew to Istanbul airport in a light plane. But he said that the coup people had actually taken over the control tower and they'd switched off the lights on the runway. So in this light plane, they kept swooping down to see if they could land, or if the coup, vehicles on the runway to catch his or any other plane coming down. It just all kind of rings true. I don't believe this is all a cunning plan to lure out his enemies. I think it was very lucky to escape in one piece.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it seems strange that they didn't shoot him down.
Earlier, the people saying, will he exploit it? This is a highly authoritarian dictatorial, he's kind of elected dictator at this stage, or almost. Will they, any remaining obstacles, institutional or personal, to his sort of complete monopoly of power, will they now disappear? Will they exploit it? The answer is probably. But on the other hand, most of the detentions so far are people who have some sort of link to the Gulenists. Now, this may be sort of benign. That's nothing involved in the coup. It's just, you could have written some articles for a newspaper or appeared on a television channel, several times that was run by Gulenists. So I think it's a fairly broad sweep. But there hasn't been a sort of second stage yet when they just sort of detain or try to eliminate any form of dissent, so that might come.
Hey, y'all, Scott Horton here for WallStreetWindow.com. Mike Swanson knows his stuff. He made a killing running his own hedge fund and always gets out of the stock market before the government-generated bubbles pop, which is, by the way, what he's doing right now, selling all his stocks and betting on gold and commodities. Sign up at WallStreetWindow.com and get real-time updates from Mike on all his market moves. It's hard to know how to protect your savings and earn a good return in an economy like this. Mike Swanson can help. Follow along on paper and see for yourself. WallStreetWindow.com. Yeah. So over the past few years, Patrick, do you have much of an estimation of what the Turkish military's view has been of the war in Syria, and especially, after the rise of the al-Nusra Front and the Islamic State? Because, of course, Erdogan has, pretty obviously had a motive in doing what he's doing. But again, the military is supposedly this very secularist organization that you would think would beware of such a thing like that, and especially when it comes to picking a fight with Russia over it and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, it was said, I think rightly, that the army was, had opposed it and said it just wasn't doable in Syria. Now things are blurred a bit because Erdogan and his people are saying, they've arrested a lot of the army as Gulenists, and even they've arrested, you probably know this, the two pilots who shot down the Russian aircraft last year, which at the time the Turkish government seemed to say that, it had been done on the Prime Minister's orders. They're now saying it was the Gulenist pilots who wanted to stir things up, so they shot down the plane. Mm-hmm. Not sure I entirely believe that, but, there's a lot of things. Well, they want better relations with Russia. There's an awful lot of things they can start blaming on the Gulenists. Also the sort of, the extreme repression of the Kurds and so forth. Now, some of this might be true. The Gulenists might have wanted to sort of discredit their own government by extreme violence towards any form of dissent in order to sort of lay to get public opinion, against Erdogan. But it sounds a bit too elaborate. I think they're going to be a scapegoat for anything that went wrong here in the last few years.
Yeah. So now, I mean, it sounds like, the role of the Gulenists kind of confuses, the typical narrative as you've been talking about as far as the secularists and the Islamists, but it's always been kind of a paradox that it takes military dictatorship to create a modern Western secular democracy, and then they're supposed to step back and let democracy take place, but then the conservatives and the religious types always win the elections because they're the majority. So then they just go back and forth like this, it seems like. And, I don't know exactly, as you were saying, it's kind of hard to tell where the overlap is between these different factions at this point. But it does seem kind of weird that the Turkish military would have gone along with Assad even this long when it comes to helping al-Nusra, and if not the Islamic State itself.
Gone along with Erdogan, yeah.
That's what I meant to say.
Maybe what happened was that, the army, since Ataturk was the great sort of secular institution, it also kept sort of interfering in politics. usually against the left, but also against the Islamists. There are a number of, coups, some tanks in the streets like 1980s, some sort of part of the army trying to take over in 1960. But generally it was the army as an institution trying to do that. Now, when Erdogan came in 2002, he was very nervous that, there was going to be, won the election, there was going to be a military takeover. Therefore, they had this alliance with the Gulenists. And then in about 2008, for about 3 years, there were these show trials in which about 300 or 400 officers were arrested, including generals, for being involved in two plots. Now, it seems these plots were a complete fabrication. Now, it was known, that they'd removed a lot of secularist officers. What people haven't certainly, in general, I think, haven't taken on board, they've been replacing these secular officers, generals, colonels, with their own guys. So quite suddenly, there were these lots of jobs vacant at a senior level. Yeah. And the Gulenists were taking their own hand-picked candidates and sympathizers and putting them in these jobs. Yeah. Which is why so many generals have now been arrested.
Well, it sure sounds like those days are over now. As far
I guess
as
so, yeah, but this is a place, the army is a big institution here. Now it's kind of a wreck, You can't arrest a third of the generals, lots of colonels and so forth. Everybody's going to be looking over their shoulder. Is somebody denouncing me, as a disloyal to the state? So that's a big blow. Then it's under pressure because of the war in Syria. It's under pressure because of the rise of, Islamic State, the bomb attacks here. We had bombed Istanbul airport about a month ago. And of course, they've been, Erdogan fomented really this renewal of war with the Kurds down in the southeast. Again, part of that, the degree of repression has been blamed on the Gulenists. But so this is a place under a lot of pressure. People don't quite know which way Erdogan will go. Will be general repression, or will they, just try to have a purge of the Gulenists. Also, it's pretty isolated internationally. Bad relations with the U.S., with the European Union. They don't like the fact that sort of people congratulating Erdogan for having survived the coup. It all seemed kind of late in the day and rather lip service. Mm-hmm. And that's a sort of measure of the place being pretty isolated.
Right. Yeah. John Kerry's original statement was, well, cough, cough, we like stability and continuity. And then it wasn't until the coup was clearly failing that they said that they supported the democratically elected government. It was pretty ham-handed, timing-wise.
Yeah, there are a lot of Turks, who hate this government, and they say, yeah, it's elected, but it was, it's not exactly democratically elected because a lot of, they'd taken over all the media, independent media, or most of it. They were using all the state media 24 hours a day as propaganda. They're making it very difficult for the other side to campaign. So it wasn't exactly a level playing field, but, Erdogan also got a lot of votes, This isn't a sort of minority regime. So it is kind of an elected dictatorship in many ways. So, now we see what happens. But the place is still rocking from this really completely unexpected coup. And the discovery that the Turks were always taught, the army was the great institution, even more than most countries, that this was the backbone of the state. And then they find the whole thing is infested with these conspirators, who've been kicking out other officers, taking the jobs, and this is true of the whole government, Apparently in the foreign ministry, there are people who, because they're Gulenists, got in, but somehow couldn't speak any foreign languages, but then sort of were sent abroad and couldn't talk to anybody because they didn't know any English. And, so people are still sort of rather open-mouthed about that.
All right, now you mentioned his renewed war against the Kurds, and we hear really very little about that. How bad is that? As far as the...
Pretty bad. They've been so wrecking cities down in the southeast, Diyarbakir, Cizre. Hasn't been much reported. They put quite a lot of effort into making sure it wasn't much reported. Difficult people to go down there. They arrested a few people, journalists. And also, I think, the war, Islamic State and the war in Iraq and Syria was sort of the absorbing most of the media. So it didn't get much coverage. I was trying to encourage people to write more about it, but it was there. You in for the information there. You could, if you dug for it, but somehow the war remains sort of obscure and off the international agenda.
Well, now, so America and Russia are both backing the Syrian Kurds and the YPG, which are just the cross-border cousins of the PKK that Turkey is attacking now. So what do you think that says about the future of so-called Rojava and the Syrian Kurds once their war with Islamic State is over?
They're doing pretty well, at the moment, but they're doing well, but they've got a big backing from the U.S., the U.S. Air Force, so they can call in airstrikes. They've got good relations with the Russians. What worries them a bit, is that they're also attacking a town called Manbij, which is very important because it's just west of the Euphrates, and it's sort of Islamic State's last exit point, Turkey and the outside world. If they lose that area, then they're completely sealed off. And the Kurds, and they have some sort of Arab proxies called the Syrian Democratic Forces, have taken most of that town, so that's quite important. What worries them is that, the international community, the U.S. loves them at the moment because they're fighting Islamic State. But what if Islamic State goes down? They'll be overextended and maybe they won't have any friends. So that worries them a bit. On the other hand, this whole business in Turkey means that the U.S., maybe they have this base at Incirlik, which they were using to bomb Islamic State. But then during the coup, the government switched off the electricity there. They said, they did that with all the bases to stop the coup people using it. And they've arrested the Turkish commander, the commander of the Turkish side of the base. So that's looking increasingly rocky from the U.S. point of view. So they may want to try and have bases in Rojava instead, or maybe in Iraqi Kurdistan.
All right. Well, Patrick, I've kept you half an hour. I got a million more questions, but I guess I'll have to wait till next time. I really appreciate you coming on the show as you do.
Thank you so much.
All right, y'all. That is the heroic Patrick Cockburn. The book is Chaos and Caliphate. I mean, come on. This is literally the best reporter there is in the Western world on the Near East that exists. It's the independent.co.uk for all his articles, also uns.com. And again, the book is Chaos and Caliphate. The latest at UNS is called Erdogan Shuts Down Huge Swath of Gulenist Institutions. All right, y'all, and that's the Scott Horton Show. Check out the archives and sign up for the podcast feed at scotthorton.org. Help support at scotthorton.org/donate. All kinds of great kickbacks, audio books and silver rounds and all kinds of wonderful things if you help support the show at scotthorton.org/donate. And also you can follow me on Twitter at Scott Horton Show. You hate government, one of them libertarian types, or maybe you just can't stand the president, gun grabbers, or warmongers. Me too. That's why I invented LibertyStickers.com. Well, Rick owns it now, and I didn't make up all of them, but still, if you're driving around and want to tell everyone else how wrong their politics are, there's only one place to go. LibertyStickers.com has got your bumper covered. Left, right, libertarian, empire, police, state, founders quotes, central banking. Yes, bumper stickers about central banking. Lots of them. And, well, everything that matters. LibertyStickers.com. Everyone else's stickers suck. Hey, I'll check out the audiobook of Lew Rockwell's Fascism versus Capitalism, narrated by me, Scott Horton, at audible.com. It's a great collection of his essays and speeches on the important tradition of liberty. From medieval history to the Ron Paul Revolution, Rockwell blasts our statist enemies, profiles our greatest libertarian heroes, and prescribes the path forward in the battle against Leviathan. Fascism versus Capitalism by Lew Rockwell for audiobook. Find it at Audible, Amazon, iTunes, or just click in the right margin of my website at scotthorton.org.